afternoon, Kelly. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Colin. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for coming to talk to us about the guide today. I'll just start with the first question. Can you tell us a little bit about UK coaching and what you're doing to make training more accessible for disabled people, please?
Yeah, sure. So UK Coaching Solutions, and including our awarding organisation First Sport, we fundamentally believe that everybody should have access to learning, whether that's regulated or unregulated. So, for example, we will work directly with coaches to create learning that's accessible in multiple formats and understand their learners' needs. Or, for example, we'll work through partners such as our national governing bodies or private training providers to advocate accessibility through their methods of delivery as well. So as an example, whilst we're talking about accessibility, we might be talking about people with impairments and disabilities, but actually it's broadening access full stop. So, providing, for example, access to experts directly to the coach, as an example, through free to access products, so that even cost isn't a barrier perhaps for those that are maybe on low income or maybe not be able to afford to access potential training, for example. So that's what we work really, really hard to do at UK Coaching.
Excellent. People often think of accessibility as things like lifts and stair ramps, don't they? Actually, there's a lot more to it than that, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And the guide has a section about making digital resources accessible. Do you think that's important as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we've learned anything post-pandemic, it's about the value of digital resources. And I do think that the more we can do to make that accessible through things like, for example, screen readers or just thinking about software and platforms and not assuming that everybody is digitally savvy and literate, I think as well is a really key thing to think in mind. So there's been some research I know that the government had done around the digital divide, and I know that as we steer towards a more digital first approach, I would say, in terms of design and access to services and training, as an example, learning, it can widen that gap a little bit. So I do think that whilst our digital resources, digital learning is our friend, it's what we're perhaps more leaning to as our first stop. I do think we just need to be mindful about who isn't able to access that digital offer and how can we make that more accessible as well.
Yeah, completely. I think we've all been heavily reliant upon digital technology in the pandemic specifically, haven't we? Without it, I don't know what we would have done. But I think, we do need to play a little bit of catch up on, okay, is everybody able to access this? Is this the right approach?
And who isn't in the room is what I'm also really interested in. Yeah.
Excellent, yeah. What types of resources do UK Coaching use in your training, and how do you make them accessible for people?
Yeah, so the first thing we do is listening to the learner, listening to the insight. So we really are led by insight in every decision we make. So often we're hearing first-hand from learners or via delivery centres about the difficulties of delivering through perhaps pure digital means. So more recently we've taken a more hybrid approach to delivering learning, so we're not sort of going just 100% digitally, because we also recognise in our sector in particular, coaching's a people thing, it's a doing thing, it's a skill thing as well, and whilst we might be able to dial up, for example, knowledge delivery on perhaps e-learning or on a platform through things like our digital toolkits, we also appreciate there's a lot of value around maybe workshopping either online or face-to-face around sense making and deepening that understanding further. So things, for example, like coaching philosophy is a really big topic to try and deliver online through an e-learning or a purely digital means. Coaches still report through our insight that they want to get together, they want to collaborate, they want to mix with like-minded people, learn with each other, have their learning facilitated, and then ultimately you've got the blended approach where you're actually getting into some of the doing, and for an assessor, if it is going to be in a regulated environment, to be able to safely assess people to make sure that they are fit to practice, it's a really valuable tool. So but for us it's about how they all blend together and how we shift the energy of that content, of that learning, and where is it best placed. What we have found recently is that learners are really, really well aware now that they don't need to go and sit in a venue on a specific day and time to be told information or to attend lecture style events. They will happily turn around and say, I'm pretty sure we've we could have learnt this online, because they are much more aware now of technology and how it can be utilised. But like I said, it's about how we really use that hybrid approach to its best advantage to support learners.
Absolutely, yeah. Some of the great examples I've seen from UK coaching are when you provided information in a variety of formats, so it gives learners the choice as well.
100%.
So that both not only meets the customer's needs, but also has a very accessible approach to the learning as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bro, obviously, do you think you'll take anything from the guide? What did you find useful about it?
Yeah, I thought the guide was, it's just an amazing document. I really love that the guidance is really tangible. So we're not just talking hybrid here. What I really like about it is that, for example, there's a section on screen readers. So it's something that I've worked with for quite a number of years now here at UK Coaching. And I remember the first e-learning build we did back only probably about 3.5 years ago now. And the e-learning authoring tool, which I won't name, was not accessible for screen readers, and we had to manipulate what is alt text, basically what a screen reader reads from, and there was no sort of magic button you could press and it made it accessible, and it added, small things like that added to the cost of a build, because it was almost like building an e-learning course twice in the background. But since then, in the last 3.5 years, e-learning technology, for an example, and digital technology has come so far that actually it makes the job of developing e-learning much easier, to be a lot more accessible. And it is simply now the flick of a switch. Instructional designers across the land now obviously wants a little bit more than that, but it is now, compared to what it was, a flick of a switch to basically say we want this now to be screen reader compatible. But what I really like about the guide is it doesn't just say e-learning needs to be screen reader compatible. It tells you what a screen reader is and who might be able to use a screen reader. And it goes a little bit beyond that in terms of talking about a screen reader isn't just for those with a visual impairment. It talks about a screen reader that's really helpful for anybody that actually would like to hear the screens being read out to them as opposed to them reading. Well, that opens up that accessibility for a lot of people, quite a lot of the population. So that's what I really like about the guide. It just goes a little bit deeper. And a section particular that I really, really liked in particular was the funding section. So it's not something that, unless you have a disability or unless you work within that environment, you're not always privy to knowing what streams of funding an individual might have access to, or what we could draw down as individuals and agencies to support the development of a product that's going to help somebody. So for me, that was really, really helpful, because sometimes a barrier for an organisation to creating accessible learning can sometimes be the cost, and I think that by understanding a little bit more about funding streams that could be available will hopefully help people and organisations to consider it, for sure.
Definitely, that's great to hear. Thanks, Kelly. Have you seen any changes in recent years? Do you think you'll see more people? Have you seen, and do you think you'll see more disabled people getting involved in coaching and leading sport physical activity?
Yeah, so probably just pre-pandemic, we saw a significant increase in our awarding organisation, First Sport. We saw a significant increase in a request for special considerations coming through, not only around assessment, but the learning itself. And with that, we also found that we had an increase in requests from partners who wanted to look at their learning programmes to make them more accessible and their assessments more accessible as well. And that's around coach education, because they want to open their doors to encourage more people with a disability, or people from all walks of life that might not necessarily be able to access that type of opportunity. They wanted to start to open them doors much more. So I definitely have seen an increase in that. And then the second thing as well, I can speak on behalf of UK Coaching, is we more recently in the past couple of years included a simple question on our recruitment to some of our learning. Do you require additional support to aid your learning, or do you require any additional support? And that simple question has opened up the conversation with individuals to understand, well, what is it that we can do? So we know more people with a disability or support needs are accessing our products because we know more requests are coming through, and they're not big onerous requests. I mean, we're talking, can we have the slides up front before the presentation so that we can digest the information, or I can pull it through my screen reader, or can, for example, my BSL language interpreter come on as well as part of the session to help me understand what's going on? And these are not huge things that organisations have to sort of flap about. These are really small things that actually make a massive impact. So yeah, I have seen an increase absolutely with coaches or potential coaches coming through and taking on our learning for sure, who have disabilities or impairments.
Absolutely, that's a perfect takeaway message to finish this interview. That actually, some of the changes that you need to make aren't that difficult and don't cost anything. All you need to do is open that conversation.
100%, yeah.
Right, well, thanks for joining us today, Kelly. Really appreciate your time you spent with us.
No problem. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.